Bring Her Wolf, Michelle Fox. Copyright 2013. All rights reserved. Bring Her Wolf. I raised the wine bottle in a toast. Happy 25th birthday to me. My living room was empty, so no one answered or looked at me funny when I went on to say, and to being run out of town. With a morose frown, I tipped the bottle back against my lips and let the fruity wine flood my mouth. Using a glass was an unnecessary formality when drinking alone. Taking another slug from the bottle, I contemplated my immediate future. Tomorrow, I would load up a moving truck and go out to make my life among humans, even though I wasn't one, technically. But those were the rules, and I didn't belong in Huntsville. Not anymore. A knock sounded at my door. "Pizza's here," I said. Talking to myself kept me from being lonely. I fumbled with my purse and extracted the requisite 20. Flinging my front door open, I accepted the box from Peter. He was 17 with a lanky frame still waiting to fill out. He'd been my pizza guy for at least a year. "Thanks, Pete." I offered the money. He held up his hands. "This one's on me." He looked at me with pity. He knew. Hell, they all knew. I was the talk of the town, the only null in 4 generations, and the horror that kept the parents of Huntsville up at night. The frightful aberration they used to make children behave. Clean your room, or you won't shift either. Eat your peas, or you'll be homeless too. I blinked and swallowed back the wine-soaked bitterness. "Thanks. Good luck, Chloe." "Luck has passed me by, Pete." He didn't know what to say to that, and shifted uncomfortably, staring at his feet. I saved him further discomfort by slamming the door shut and retreating into the living room with the pizza. I'd taken 2 bites when another knock sounded at the door. I froze, my brow furrowed at the noise. The knock came again. I finished chewing and went to the door, irritation creeping up my spine. I flung the door open a little harder than I'd intended, and it bounced off the wall, forcing me to keep it from closing with my hand. "What is it, Pete?" My tone was hostile. "Hello, Chloe." I would never mistake that deep baritone for an adolescent pizza delivery boy. My breath caught in my throat, and I looked up, and up to meet the gaze of Jackson Swift. There are bad boys, and there's badass. Jackson was very much the latter. He'd moved to Huntsville at the invitation of the Pack Alpha. I'd given him a wide berth because staying out of pack business was expected of me, and a new wolf was definitely pack business. We'd worked together for a bit at the one bar in town. I'd waitressed there ever since I was of age, and 6 months ago, he'd sweet-talked his way into bartending. I'd seen it happen. My boss, Sheila, had swooned like a flower in a windstorm. She was putty in his hands. Whenever we worked the same shift, he'd watched me like he was hungry and I was raw steak. It weirded me out, and I avoided him every chance I got. A few times he had even tried to talk to me, but I'd just turned around and gone the other way, heat burning my cheeks. Soon, whatever interest he had in me cooled, and he'd focused his attention on Allison, the bar slut. She went home with everyone. For the record, I never went home with anyone, mostly because no one wanted me. "What are you doing here?" My eyes narrowed, and I shifted my weight back, ready to step into the house and slam the door for a second time that night. Yet despite my wariness, I couldn't help but drink in the sight of him, handsome as a rock star and built like a fireman. He should be on a stud-of-the-month calendar, not my front porch, watching me with eyes the color of chocolate streaked with caramel. "I heard you're leaving." His gaze tracked my every movement, no matter how small. It was unnerving. I shrugged. "I'm 25. Cal said it was time." The Pack Alpha had been kind to me, given me extra time, but I was a null, a dud, a nothing. The Huntsville Pack had rules about people like me. You had to fit in or leave. I didn't belong, and I never would. I wasn't a wolf. "Where are you going?" He sounded like my answer mattered, and the sincerity caught me by surprise. "I don't know. What do you care?" I watched him as carefully as he watched me. The hair on the back of my neck rose. He was trouble. I could smell it even with my stunted senses. He lifted his head and sniffed. "You got pizza in there?" I nodded, my expression guarded. He wanted something from me, and I didn't want to get suckered. I was no flower in a windstorm. "I'm starving." I stared at him, refusing to give in. The last thing I needed was to tangle with a wolf like Jackson. He'd chew me up, spit me out, and think nothing of it. After Allison, there'd been Susan, Polly, Jenny, and who knows how many other girls made their way in and out of his pants. The circus clown car had nothing Jackson's love life. "You're not going to invite me in?" Shock registered on his face. It was possible I was the first woman in history to tell the man no. "I'm not looking for anything you got." I crossed my arms, leaning against the door jamb. "Fair enough." He stepped closer, crowding me, our bodies almost close enough to touch. His voice dipped down into a husky whisper that seemed to reach out and stroke my skin. "What if I could help you?" What if he could help me? I snorted. "Where were you 2 weeks ago? I've already quit my job, packed my stuff, and sold the house." Cal had bought it from me so I would have some money to start over with. I tried not to think about how the house had belonged to my parents. That just brought back the memory of their deaths. A car accident had left me alone at a young age and spared them the pain of knowing their only child was a waste. He stepped back, and cool air from the early autumn night rushed in to fill the void. "I've been away, visiting my mom down in Louisiana. She knows something that might fix you." I grit my teeth, nostrils flaring. "Fix me? What am I? Getting spayed?" "She's my pack's shaman, Chloe. I think you should listen to what I have to say." He managed to look serious enough that I gave a curt nod and backed away, allowing him into the house. He settled on the brown leather couch my mom had bought when I was still a kid and helped himself to a slice of pizza. He lifted the wine bottle off the coffee table and gave me a questioning look. I flopped into the recliner across from him. It had been my dad's seat, and it still smelled like his pipe. "Go ahead. Help yourself." "Thanks," he mumbled through a mouthful of food. I gave him a minute to eat and then pushed. "Spill it, Jackson. What bayou voodoo do you have up your sleeve?" "An alpha can bring your wolf." He snagged another piece of pizza and gulped it down. I sighed, deflated. If Cal could have done something, he would have. Jackson lifted one shoulder in a shrug. He might not be able to. Every pack is different, and so are the alphas. "Well, thanks for nothing." I leaned forward to close the pizza box and pulled it closer to my side of the coffee table. At the rate Jackson was eating, there wouldn't be any left for me. He held up a hand, his gaze focused on the pizza. "Hold on. Cal might not be able to, but I could. Maybe." I raised my eyebrows and motioned for him to continue. "My pack has a history of helping nulls and, well..." He squared his shoulders and sat a little straighter. "I'm an alpha." I rolled my eyes. "Sure you are." Every male wolf thought he was an alpha. They never shut up about it either. As much as I'd wanted to belong, being spared the endless posturing and strutting of a male wolf in lust was one thing that went in the plus column. He looked puzzled. "No, I'm really an alpha. Why do you think Cal asked me to come to Huntsville?" Crossing my arms, I said, "Why did he ask you here? Was he aware that you would leave no woman untouched?" Jackson winced. "Come on, that's not fair. Listen, you guys don't have an alpha here. There's no one to come up after Cal." That made my ears perk up. Pack succession was a primary concern among wolves, and I'd had no idea Huntsville lacked true alpha material. Of course, being a null, I was banned from the pack clearing, and thus had no way to know. Is Cal sick? My stomach sank to think of a world without him. He'd been as kind as a father to me many times. No, but he's planning for the future. He eyed the pizza box, and I moved it closer to me, pushing down on the lid again for emphasis. Mine. "You're the future of the Huntsville pack?" I stifled a laugh. God help us. Them, I corrected. Considering that Jackson would someday lead made my situation slightly more palatable. A gigolo was not my idea of prime leadership material. Why is that funny? He looked perplexed. Never mind. So, tell me, how exactly can you make me a wolf? I couldn't wait to hear what Packmaster Gigolo would say next. He cleared his throat and rubbed his hands on his pants, gaze roaming the room and looking everywhere but at me. Nervous was a new look for him. Usually, he brimmed with brash confidence. "We have to sleep together." The words came out fast in a jumble, but my mind quickly interpreted the message. I jumped out of my chair, hand over my mouth, and backed away from him. Holy shit. You've got to be fucking kidding me. I paced the living room and then froze, shooting him a look that could kill. Wait, this is a joke. You sick fuck. My hands balled into fists. I stormed over to where he sat. He stood up and sidestepped me, his arms raised in a placating gesture. No joke, Chloe. You've slept with everyone else. Why not give me a whirl, huh? Sleep with the null and see if it's any different? Am I right? I was yelling now and stalked him across the room, one hand cocked, fist at the ready. I wasn't as strong as a real wolf, but I wasn't human weak either. Oh yeah, I could bring the pain. Wait, he began. But I lunged for him, my fist aiming for his jaw. My fist never landed. Instead of feeling my bones grinding into his, I connected with flesh stronger than my own. He caught both of my hands and pulled me close, pinning my fists behind my back. Then his lips crushed mine in a fierce kiss. I'd never been kissed. Nulls can't be mates, and that meant I was out of the dating pool from day one. The shock of his lips against mine left me motionless for a moment. A strangled gasp escaped my throat. I wrestled with his grip, but couldn't break his hold. His mouth was insistent, plucking at my lower lip, tongue probing. He tasted like pizza and wine, and the smell of him filled my senses. So this is what it's like to be kissed. The thing is, Chloe, you smell like wolf to me. He barely pulled away enough to speak, and his words telegraphed through my body in little shivers. I think she's in there and just doesn't know how to come. He nuzzled my neck then, nose caressing me as he inhaled deeply. I froze under the assault of sensations I didn't fully understand. My body felt like it was the wrong size, stretched too thin in some places and too slack in others. The smell of fur filled my nose along with hyper-awareness of Jackson's musk. When I blinked, I saw a wolf staring back at me from behind my eyelids. She, instinctively I knew she was female, was light gray and her gaze bore into mine. I gasped and my eyes flew open. What is it? He lifted his head, concerned. I don't know. I licked my lips. I think I saw my wolf. He gave me a satisfied smile. See, I told you. I closed my eyes again. She was still there, but pacing now. Something under my skin prickled as if she moved through my flesh. She's beautiful. You never saw her before? I shook my head, keeping my eyes closed. I'd heard talk about how your wolf danced in your mind. Wolves appear right before the first change, which, for women, often coincided with their first menstrual cycle. I'd hit puberty, but my wolf had been a no-show. Now that she was finally here, I couldn't stop watching her. So now you know I wasn't joking. Am I going to shift? The idea of that took my breath away. I'd never dared to hope, but that very emotion blossomed in me like spring after a desolate winter. His body moved around me as he shifted his weight. It takes more than a kiss to bring out a wolf. His voice was a soft murmur on my skin. He kissed me again, nipping the nape of my neck with his lips. How do you know? I tested his grip again, disappointed to find it as firm as ever. Jackson wasn't going to let me go anytime soon. My wolf gave a low growl, unhappy as I was at being restrained. Because my mom said so. He moved to the hollow of my throat and pressed his lips against my thundering pulse. Did she also tell you to sleep with everything that moved? His lips went still. You sound upset. His inflection implied I shouldn't be, and it rankled. I huffed, irritated. You've been sleeping your way through town. It doesn't exactly make a girl feel special to be last on the list. You've got me all wrong. I opened my eyes for a second to glare at him. How so? I closed my eyes again, not wanting to lose sight of my wolf. She sniffed the ground intently, looking for something. You were always first on the list. My eyes opened wide. What? He lifted his head, and his gaze locked with mine, wolf shining through in the yellow gleam of his pupils. Like I said, you always smelled like wolf to me. The second I met you, I wanted you. I didn't know you were a null until Cal told me. I was silent for a moment. So, then you slept with everyone else instead? He sighed. You have to understand, I'm supposed to find a mate, preferably sooner than later. Cal wants me settled in. I furrowed my brow in confusion. Are you like some mail-order wolf groom? Cal just sends out an order and you show up? In a roundabout way, my pack has too many alphas. Yours is all betas. Word got out and Cal made me an offer. He shrugged. So here I am, ta-da, the alpha on order. His tone was so light and self-effacing that I couldn't hold back a giggle. My wolf's ears perked up at the sound, and she cocked her head, listening. Are we going to do this, Chloe? Are you going to let me bring your wolf? His soft, low voice made me weak in the knees. I didn't hesitate, not with everything I'd ever wanted so tantalizingly close. Yes. I'm going to let you go now. Don't hit me, okay? I bit my lip. Shame washed over me at my behavior. Sorry about that. The pressure on my wrists eased and I was free. I shook out my arms, releasing the tension from being locked in one position for so long. Let's start over, from the beginning. A hand on each shoulder, he pulled me against him and kissed me. With gentle persistence, he won his way into my mouth, tongue teasing mine. A dizzy heat surged through me, rushing with my pulse until I tingled all over. He grasped the hem of my shirt, lifting it up to expose my stomach, his fingertips grazing my ribcage in the process. Unbidden, I raised my arms overhead and he pulled off my top. Tossing it to the floor, he continued to ply me with kisses as he worked to unhook my bra. Shy about being the only one naked, I decided to remove his t-shirt, forcing him to pause in his efforts to strip me bare. Jackson's chest was broad and sleek with muscle. I ran my hands over his pecs, the nubs of his nipples brushing across my palms. His shoulders flexed at my touch, and he sucked in his stomach with a hiss when I trailed my fingers over his abdomen. There's something you need to know, I said, my voice hesitant. He raised an eyebrow, his hands pausing in their efforts to remove my bra. I'm a virgin. I breathed it more than said it. Closing my eyes, I retreated to my wolf, who paced anxiously against the screen of my eyelids. Jackson cupped my face in his hand, thumb caressing my cheek. It's okay, Chloe. I gave a shaky laugh, the sound making my wolf freeze. At least you've had a lot of practice. I've had a lot of practice in a lot of different things. He captured my bottom lip in his mouth and sucked for a long moment. Between kisses, he said, I wasn't an attractive kid, you know? Sure, I shifted. I was an alpha, but the girls wanted nothing to do with me. I opened my eyes and took in his dark good looks and rippling physique with a doubtful expression. He was sexier than calorie-free ice cream. I tried to picture girls turning their noses up at him and failed. He read the doubt on my face and gave a soft chuckle. It's true. I was skinny with acne. A weakling alpha in a pack full of bigger, stronger alphas just looking for an excuse to take me out. What changed? I asked. I worked out. I grew into my body, and I stayed out of the way. The point being, you aren't the only one who's lived on the fringe of a pack. I did it for a long time. My bra finally came free, going slack around my breasts, and he smiled at the small victory. You see me as I am today, but it didn't come fast or easy for me. I clutched my bra strap, resisting his efforts to pull it off my shoulders. He paused, his thumbs circling the skin on each shoulder. Nervous? Swallowing hard, I nodded. Don't be. You're in good hands. He planted a kiss at the nape of my neck and gently bit me there, sucking the skin hard and fast into his mouth. Coming up for air, he said, I'm going to enjoy making you howl, Chloe. I've wanted to hear you scream for a long time. He inched the bra straps over my shoulders, moving down toward my elbows. Just let go. My arms went slack right on cue, allowing him to pull the bra free. The air was cool on my skin, and I shuddered slightly as goosebumps raced over me, puckering my nipples. Jackson cupped a breast in each hand. His thumbs stroked the tips, and my breathing hitched. Something deep inside me flexed and tightened. He kissed his way down my neck, pressing his lips against my sternum before veering over to take a nipple into his mouth. The sensation was like warm velvet stroking my skin. I gasped when he increased the suction, my hands going up to his shoulders in an effort to ground myself against the heady pleasure of his touch. He continued to tease my breasts as he tugged at the waistband of my jeans, pushing the button out of its loop and pulling down the zipper. His fingers worked their way inside my underwear and found the cleft between my legs. One lone finger wiggled into my core, touching the wet heat there. My knees sagged. If I hadn't kept such a tight grip on his shoulders, I might have fallen. "Why don't we go to the bedroom?" My voice came out in a strangled gasp. He released my breast and straightened up, but his finger lingered at the nexus of my core. "Lead the way." My heart beating like a frightened hummingbird, I took him by the hand and navigated the short hallway to my bedroom. The room was a mess of boxes, but the bed remained intact. I had considered an air mattress, but then rejected it in favor of comfort. Now, given the circumstances, I was doubly glad I had opted to keep it. Jackson pushed me down on the bed and yanked my pants off, tossing them over his shoulder. Eyes locked on mine, he leaned down and took the elastic of my panties in his mouth. With a low growl that vibrated over my pubic mound, he pulled them down, using his hands on my hips to aid in their removal. Letting my panties drop to the floor, he stood and took off his pants, kicking them into a corner. He didn't wear underwear, and my eyes widened when I caught sight of his cock. He was so much bigger than I had expected, but everyone always said wolves were well endowed. This was just my first time seeing the truth of that up close and personal. Catching the expression on my face and the direction of my gaze, he smiled. "Don't worry. We'll fit like we were made for each other." "Are you sure?" I tried and failed to hide my concern. He came onto the bed and wrapped my fingers around his shaft. "Yes." I skimmed the length of him. He was soft and hard all at the same time. A pulse throbbed against my palm that gave the illusion of movement, as if he was jumping at my touch. The deepest, darkest part of me spasmed with need, jealous of my hand. Jackson lifted my hand to his mouth for a kiss. "As you have pointed out, I have some experience in these matters." I laughed, more from nerves than anything else. "What do we do now?" "You just lay back and let me do all the work." That sounds hardly fair. The memories of every romance I'd ever read and every movie I'd ever seen flashed through my mind. Oh God, this was going to happen. I was the damsel about to be ravished. A tingle went through me at the thought. "You can pay me back some other time." A slow smile spread across his lips, and he leaned in to kiss me and tease my breasts with his expert touch. I gasped and arched up against him, nipples hardening. Moving down, he replaced his hand with his mouth, sealing his lips over each pebbled nipple in turn. His tongue lashed the sensitive tips into stiff, throbbing points. A heaviness filled my breasts. I wondered if this was how his cock felt, all tense and hard, almost bursting with need. He lifted his head and looked at me. "Close your eyes. Focus on your wolf." I nodded and quickly shut my eyes. My wolf gave me an impatient look, as if scolding me for leaving her alone so long. With a haughty gait, she walked away from me, almost fading into the distance, and then she froze, her ears upright on high alert. Jackson kissed his way to my stomach, his hands caressing me in time with his tongue. When he reached the wet heat between my legs, he kissed the top of my mound and encouraged my knees to part with a gentle nudge. Focusing on my legs, he skimmed his fingers across the sensitive skin of my inner thighs and delved into the hollow behind each knee. I undulated on the bed, his touch sparking a full body tingle of pleasure. He lowered his head, his mouth burning a trail up my thigh and finally to my core. His tongue pressed against my wet entrance, breaching it for the first time before swirling up to the quivering nub at the top. My hands fisted in the sheet, and my hips rose up off the bed as I gave a soft cry. In the distance of my mind's eye, my wolf began to run straight toward me, a look of fierce concentration on her face. Jackson sucked on my clit as he gently but persistently pushed a finger inside me, followed by a second and then a third. Desire surged in me like a gasoline-fed fire. I was hot all over, my body twisting this way and that way, my restless feet searching for purchase on the mattress. A tight coil of pleasure wound in my belly. With one enormous flex, it exploded. I screamed. My wolf gathered her haunches under her and jumped. She sailed through the air, fangs bared and her eyes gleaming yellow. I flew with her on wings of ecstasy, and then she seemed to slam into an invisible barrier. The force of her impact shuddered through me, real and tangible in my body. She fell with a yelp and lay still. I stopped breathing, horror rising up to clog my throat. Was she dead? No. My voice was a mournful cry. Tears filled my eyes and spilled onto my cheeks. What is it? Jackson shifted on the bed and moved up to lay beside me. What's wrong? Concern filled his voice. I held up a hand to silence him, not wanting to take my focus off what was happening to my wolf. She remained motionless, but after a long moment I could see her chest rise and fall. She was breathing. She's alive. But why didn't I shift? As if she heard my question, she turned her head to look at me. Her ears were down and back, a sign that she was stressed, but her eyes held alert intelligence. She stood and gave her body a shake, stretching her back legs behind her. After that, she began to pace again. Chloe, are you okay? Jackson touched my shoulder, concerned by my silence. I held back a sob. I didn't shift. My wolf couldn't break through. Shh. He pulled me close in a soothing hug. We're not done yet. I haven't called your wolf, I've just woken her up. How do you know? My eyes fluttered open to glare at him. Jackson shrugged. My mom, remember? Besides, I can feel it. It's not over yet. Promise. He kissed my shoulder. Are you ready? I nodded, and he kneeled between my legs, his hard shaft jutting in front of him. I'm going to go nice and slow. Just try to relax and focus on your wolf, okay? Okay. I closed my eyes, and my wolf paused in her pacing to give me an arch look. She tried to walk forward, but was held back by some unseen force. She tossed her head and walked away, putting some distance between us. I assumed she intended to try and rush me again. The head of Jackson's cock bumped against my wet entrance, and with gentle pressure, he won his way inside. It pinched, but mostly I felt primal satisfaction at being taken, as if I had finally fulfilled some ancient purpose. It took some time for me to feel pleasure with his thrusts, though. It happened in phases. First, I had to accustom myself to being stretched in both width and length. There was a sharp pain that made me gasp. He paused at that moment and leaned down on his elbows, his abs of iron on top of my soft stomach, to suck a nipple while pinching the other between his fingers. Only when I was fully distracted by all the sensations in my breasts did he resume pumping his hips. Sitting up, he reached for the sweet nub between my legs and stroked it in time with his thrusts. A throbbing heat rose up and overtook any discomfort. I pushed my hips up to meet him on the downstroke. I wanted him to fill me up, to never leave me empty. Jackson groaned. That's it, baby. Take all of me. He increased his pace, and I moaned. Every time he sank himself into me, there was a little starburst of ecstasy. My wolf raced straight at me, a black speck in the horizon of my mind's eye, moving faster and closer every second. At the same time, the spiral that would carry me up to an orgasm tightened. Let's go deeper. Jackson lifted up my legs, placing them on his shoulder. My eyes opened wide for a second at the change in sensation. He was deeper, longer than before, and hitting new nerves that quivered with delicious pleasure. Once again, my hands twisted in the sheets. My back arched up, and my wolf seemed to run at light speed. My heart roared in my ears, and the smell of sex mixed with fur filled my nose. The orgasm exploded. All my muscles flexed, first contracting short, and then fluttering in release. I howled, attempting to relieve some of the pent-up pleasure before it blew me apart. My wolf had a fierce look of determination on her face as she jumped at me one more time. I screamed again. My wolf jumped again. My back arched off the bed. My body was too long and too tight. Bones shattered under the strain and grew back in a new formation. Sharp pinpricks pushed through my skin while the muscles underneath melted. I wanted to open to my eyes, but lacked the autonomy to do so. I was at the mercy of an outside force I couldn't control. For however long it went on in a mind-shattering mix of pain and ecstasy. In the distance, I heard Jackson's voice. Just go with it, baby. Let it happen. The sensations were too overwhelming for me to even try to formulate a response. My flesh ripped open like ripe fruit and grew into a new, unfathomable shape, expanding and contracting in time with my thundering heartbeat. When it finished, I was an exhausted heap on the bed. I slept, or maybe passed out. I couldn't say for sure. When I could finally open my eyes, morning sunlight poured through the window in a yellow haze. I lay still and blinked until the blurriness at the edges of my vision sharpened into recognizable details. The stacks of boxes looming to the side, the rose pattern on my bedspread, and the little dots of dust dancing in the sunlight. I sucked in a long drag of air, filling my lungs. The room smelled like sex. Heavy, hot sex. I sniffed, enjoying the aroma. Jackson woke at the sound, jerking into full consciousness mid-snore. A slow smile spread across his face. "You're up?" I tried to talk, but my voice wouldn't cooperate. "You did it," he said, patting my head. Did what? I wanted to ask, but all that came out were some strangled, high-pitched sounds. He pointed at me. "Look at yourself." I looked down and saw a dainty paw. Looking behind me, my gaze caught the sight of my flank and the tail beyond. My wolf had come. I yipped with excitement. Springing to my feet, I turned in a circle, so excited I tripped myself and fell off the bed. I landed with a yelp, but quickly bounced back up, too happy to be embarrassed. Jackson stood up and stretched. I watched him with rapt attention. He was sinfully beautiful. The sweet spot deep in my core spasmed at the memory of the night before. I would be sad when he finished with me and moved on to his next conquest. "You ready for your first hunt?" He walked out of the bedroom, and I followed after him, my ears up. Unable to form human words with my new mouth, I yowled the wolf version of yes. He opened the front door and motioned for me to go through. Once I was outside, he stepped onto the front porch, still naked, and shut the door after him. "Let's go," he said. In a blink, he shifted. Jackson's wolf shook his large frame, rearranging his dark sable fur. He had enormous paws that were almost as big as his human hands. With a clipped bark, he ran for the woods. I loped after him, my head swimming with all sorts of novel sensations. The earth tickled my feet, and so many new smells assailed me that I had a hard time focusing my attention. We raced through the woods and flushed out a rabbit, chasing it from the brush, crowding it into a corner. I bit through its tiny neck to make the kill. Warm blood filled my mouth along with the taste of raw meat and fur. In my wolf form, I had no remorse, only hunger and the satisfaction it craved. In a small clearing, next to a creek, we resumed our human forms. Thankfully, that didn't hurt as much as shifting into a wolf had. I set the rabbit aside and joined Jackson where he lounged under a tree. The sun was warm, but the air had a tinge of autumn coolness, which felt good on my overheated skin. Oh, that was glorious! A wide smile played on my lips as I took in the view around us. The auburn and gold leaves formed a canopy overhead with the bright blue sky beyond. The day was a panorama of seasonal perfection. Yeah, there's nothing like the first shift and the first kill. Jackson put his arm around me and pulled me close. I rested my head on his shoulder, intoxicated by his scent, a mix of earth and alpha musk. I never thought this would happen to me. I've been a gnoll so long. And now you're a wolf. You're pack. He squeezed me tight against him. Sudden tears filled my eyes. I'm pack. Me. I'd lived my life on the outside looking in. Never belonging. Tolerated, but never wanted. That was all going to change. I sniffed and laughed. Some notch in your belt, huh? The idea of Packmaster Gigolo didn't sound so bad anymore. It was certainly the best thing that had ever happened to me. He went still, his body tensing up along mine. You were never a notch, Chloe. I rolled my eyes. I had no illusions about Jackson. He was as sinful as a piece of chocolate, and just as short-lived. He'd never stuck with any girl long. A night or a week at most, and then on to the next conquest. It's okay, Jackson. I don't expect you to play house. He frowned. Are you really that dense? My mouth dropped open. Are you calling me stupid? If the shoe fits. He gave an irritated growl. I stood, ready to stomp off. Jackson sounded like everyone who'd treated me like trash just because I couldn't shift. I'd been a fool to think he'd be any different, but he grabbed my arm and pulled me back. He yanked me hard enough that I fell into his lap. Grabbing my hair, he held me in place for a searing kiss. I snapped at him with my teeth, more than willing to rip his face off and teach him a lesson, but he deftly evaded my teeth and claimed my mouth with his tongue demanding my submission. "Why do you think I went home?" he asked, after a particularly brutal kiss that left my lips throbbing like I'd been swarmed by bees. "I thought it was maybe because you'd already fucked your way through Huntsville and were bored," I said, baring my teeth at him. His grip tightened on my hair, burning my scalp with the tension of it. His other hand went to grab my pussy, and he tugged on the hair there until I yelped. "You're mine. You were always mine, and I wasn't going to let you go without a fight." "I'm not yours, Jackson," I said, unsure of the truth of my words. I sure as a full moon felt like I belonged to him, but I would bet all the other girls had felt that way too. I'd be damned if I'd let Jackson turn me into a simpering fool. "Like hell you're not." "Are you saying you want to mate me?" The idea was stunning. That meant more than a one-night stand, it was marriage. And with him slotted to succeed Cal, I would be First Lady of the Huntsville Pack, the Alpha's mate. Talk about going from zero to hero. "Yes." His knee pushed at my legs, trying to shove them open, and his cock rose up to bump my stomach. "It was always you from day one. Those other girls—" He paused as he centered his cock at the entrance of my wet passage. "Were me trying to make Cal happy and being dumb enough to think I could forget you. A pack needs an alpha's mate who knows how to stand on their own four paws, who doesn't let anyone wag their tail. That's you, Chloe. It was always you." Despite my best efforts to stay angry, his words got to me. I let my knees open, allowing him in. He penetrated me, filling me with slow thrusts. I lifted my arms, wanting to cup his face in my hands, but he caught my wrists and pushed them over my head, pinning me down. I made a noise in my throat that was a cross between a moan and a growl. I wanted to fight his manhandling and melt for him at the same time. Instead, I lifted my hips to take him deeper while pushing against his grip on my wrists, both yielding and fighting, showing him I was his, but warning him to never take me for granted. "Your pack seems to think you can choose your mate, but my pack doesn't." He rammed his cock into me as he spoke, making my breathing hitch. His size and strength sparked a delicious ache deep inside me. I met his next thrust with a rise of my hips, wanting more of him. That made his eyes gleam more yellow than brown. His wolf rippled under his muscles, riled and ready to break through. "How does your pack do it? With a harem?" I couldn't keep myself from taunting him. My wolf was just as riled. Her hair pricked me from the inside, almost bursting through my skin. "Will I have sister wives?" He glared at me and pounded his length into my core, an action that was driven by both anger and pleasure. My pack believes mates are destined. My hips spun in restless circles as my body responded to his, but my mind fumed, wanting to duke it out with him. "The second I smelled you, Chloe, I knew it was you." As if to prove his point, he ran his nose over my skin, inhaling deeply. "You smelled like my wolf, like home." For a second, his grip on me weakened, and I roared up, pushing him back and down under me. We were still joined at the pelvis, and I pumped along his hard shaft, gasping when my clit hit his pubic bone. The coil inside me tightened with a quiver. Jackson's hands battled with mine as he fought to regain his position. I managed to dodge his grip for several seconds, but he was faster and caught me. He pulled out of me and spun me around on my knees until my back was to him. Pushing me down to the ground, he entered me from behind. I gasped as he took me. His strong and rough thrust split me open, mixing pleasure with pain. The cold earth scraped my shoulders, belly and breasts, scrubbing my nipples with a mix of pleasure and pain. Jackson held my arms behind me, applying pressure to my wrists as if they were reins, and I was a horse to be ridden. My body rocked with the force of his thrusts, and the coil in my belly flexed, almost ready to burst. I pushed my hips back, slamming him just as hard as he slammed me. At one point, I reared up like a cobra. He caught me by wrapping one arm around my throat in a chokehold, sealing my back against his stomach and chest, his cock still moving in and out of my wet core. "You are mine. I am yours." He leaned down and bit the top of my shoulder. This was no gentle love bite. It was an attempt to mark me, to claim me as his. The moment his fangs drew blood, I came with a howl, my insides spasming as pleasure blasted through me. My core traced the outline of his cock, gripping him tight until he howled his own climax. Even after our release, we stayed locked together. He held my hands pressed into the small of my back while also maintaining his hold at my throat. When I swallowed, I could feel his arm on my neck. If he squeezed just a little harder, he would cut off my oxygen. Our breathing was labored, and we both sucked in air with ragged gasps as if we'd just run a marathon. Behind my eyelids, my wolf watched me with quiet interest. I couldn't tell if she approved of what had just happened or not. I mentally shrugged at her, and she looked away, breaking eye contact. At first, I thought she was shunning me, but then I realized something in the distance had caught her attention. A dark speck zoomed toward us, and when it came closer, I gasped. The speck in my mind raced straight for me. It was a wolf, a sable wolf with paws the size of a man's hands. Jackson's wolf, in my freaking head. Holy werewolf shit. "Do you see it?" he asked me. I nodded. "Yes. What does it mean?" How had I gone from no wolves to two dancing in my head in the span of a day? "We belong to each other." There was a note of satisfaction in his voice. "I can see your wolf now, too." "Is this how werewolves do it? Through mind melding?" "I don't know. This is how it works in my pack, but you Huntsville wolves are different, I think." The pressure on my wrists eased. "If I let you go, will you stop trying to beat me up?" His wolf smirked at me as if daring me to try. My wolf growled at him in warning. I watched as he tried to look innocent and failed, much like a bad dog caught in the act. "I guess so." Jackson released me, and I stood, stretching out the kinks of our lovemaking and fight match. He looked me over with an appreciative gleam in his eyes. "You're so beautiful, Chloe." I rolled my eyes. Sweet talking would get him nowhere. "What now?" I shifted. We're in each other's brains. Anything else on the werewolf agenda? "We go to Cal and give him your first kill. From there, we see what happens. No rush." His words were measured, careful. His eyes were tracking me again, like I was prey, and he was trying to predict which way I would bolt. I took a deep breath. The ache of our lovemaking throbbed between my legs. So much had happened. It made me dizzy to think of it all. I liked the idea of going at a snail's pace. I definitely needed some time to adjust and get my head screwed on straight. Maybe he was ready for happily ever after, but I had some catching up to do. He gave a curt nod. "Get your kill." I grabbed the rabbit by the ears, and we walked through the forest toward Cal's cabin. In one night, my life had forever changed. My wolf had come and given me a future as the alpha's mate. Cal sat on the front porch of his wood cabin, puffing on his pipe. At our appearance, he jumped up, pipe dangling out of his slack-with-shock mouth. He tracked me with wide eyes as I walked across his front yard naked, streaked with dirt, dead rabbit dangling from my hand. "Chloe?" I dropped the rabbit at his feet and kneeled. "I claim my place in the pack." The deep meaning of the words weighed heavy on my tongue, my heart, my soul as I spoke them. Cal held out his hand and pulled me to my feet when I took it. "Welcome, daughter of Huntsville." He gave me a big hug, enveloping me in a cloud of smoke. I'd given up hope. "You and me both," I said, his shoulder muffling my voice. "What happened?" I stepped back, breaking our embrace, and nodded back toward Jackson. "He did." Jackson cleared his throat and stood taller as our attention fell on him. Cal's eyes narrowed as his whole body bristled. "I told you to give her a wide berth." There was a long pause as the two men stared each other down, neither giving ground. Then, Cal gave a big smile and relaxed. "This is one time I'm glad to be disobeyed." He held out his hand. "You did good." They shook hands. Cal looked happy, but Jackson's expression was tight. "There's something you should know, Cal." The Huntsville Pack Alpha raised an eyebrow. "What?" "She didn't just shift, she's my mate." Jackson shifted his body weight imperceptibly back to increase the distance between him and the alpha. Cal laughed and clapped his hands. I did not see that coming. I smiled. Me either. Jackson looked at us, his expression incredulous. Was I the only one who knew? Neither of you could see it? I shook my head and Cal said, Nope. I closed my eyes for a second to commune with my wolf. She and Jackson's alter ego were sleeping in a jumbled ball of fur. I couldn't tell where he started and where she ended, but, from the location of her head, she was underneath him. I snorted. How very alpha of him. But they looked cozy and content, and I felt the same way. I opened my eyes. So how many wolves mate the same day they shift? Cal shrugged. It's never happened that I know of. I went over to Jackson and head-butted his shoulder affectionately. I guess we made pack history. He put his arm around me and squeezed as he kissed the top of my head. I always knew we would make something. Welcome to the pack, Chloe, and congratulations on mating with the pack second. Cal began to take off his clothes. How about a race to the pack clearing? Before he'd even finished speaking, Jackson and I had shifted. The second Cal assumed the burly shape of his gray wolf. We ran, air streaming over our noses, the earth soft under our feet. I was home. I was free. I was a null no more. The end. Thank you for listening. Find out what happens next. Check out the sequel to Chloe and Jackson's story in The Alpha's Mate, available on all major book retailers. About the author. USA Today and NY Times. Best-selling author Michelle Fox lives in the Midwest with her husband Tween, the occasional exchange student, and 3 dogs who steal her socks and all the space on the couch. She loves fantasy and romance, which makes writing paranormal romance and urban fantasy a natural fit. Aside from writing, she runs the Wolfpack Reads group on Facebook, a large, active community for readers. You should join. In her spare time, she helps remodel her 1860 farmhouse, drives her tween everywhere and sits in the car and drinks too much tea.